All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to meet you and see you on the call. As Tessa mentioned, my name is Jen Morell. I have the honor of serving as the Managing Director for the Ohio Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health Prevention and Promotion. We have an exciting hour planned for you. Before I kick it back to Tessa, I just wanted to share a little bit of information with you about the Center of Excellence in case this is the first time you are joining one of our prevention exchange sessions. The Center of Excellence is facilitated by a team of faculty and professional staff at Ohio University in our School of Leadership, Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Service, as well as a team of research scientists from Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation. So the center really exists to support individuals and organizations who are providing direct prevention services in the community. And we're really striving to promote, evidence-based and evidence-informed practices. And we really value creating spaces where people and organizations can get connected so we can learn with and grow from each other as professionals. We can learn to embrace prevention science and then, of course, to advance health equity. So we really do strive to support our prevention providers and organizations to network, to cooperate, to coordinate and collaborate in that spirit of being innovative so that we can overcome some of those common challenges the prevention community faces together. And this series actually is a result of that. We had some folks in the field ask to just create an informal space where people can learn for a short period of time around a particular topic and then really find value in connecting with each other through some informal dialogue. So Tessa mentioned that today's session's recorded. We do have 2 breakout opportunities. Those will not be recorded. Those are spaces for us to feel that we can talk and ask questions freely. So prevention is about community and partnerships, and we work to provide that central access point for evidence-based education, training, technical assistance, resources, and those connection opportunities. We'll provide several ways for you that you can connect with the center over the next hour or so. And rather than group them all together, I've spread them out a little bit. So if you don't receive our monthly newsletter yet, you'll want to grab your phone right now and scan that QR code and just enter your email address in there. The only way to receive our newsletter is to opt in, and we share a lot of information via that channel, links to our website. Sometimes there's funding announcements that come out of it, etc. So let's see. Today, we are delighted to introduce Tazeen Ahmed and Danielle Zeisloft with the Montgomery County Adams Board. They are grant recipients for a collective impact project in Ohio that focuses on social determinants of health, and the work that they are doing with this project and others across the state are doing as well. It ties in nicely with our theme for the month. So Tessa, I'll kick it back to you at this point, but thank you for joining us, Tazeen and Danielle.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate it. So today we want to start with some brief introductions for our panelists. So Tazeen and Danielle, we'd love to hear from you, an introduction focusing on your job and your experience and how equity has presented as a theme into your prevention work.
Yeah, so I can go ahead and jump in. Good afternoon, everyone. As Tessa and Jen said, my name is Tazeen Ahmed, and I have the privilege of working as a senior program coordinator for health policy and equity, I almost said everything, for the Montgomery County Adams Board. My work is in the field of public health, and my expertise is really focused on suicide prevention and maternal and infant child health, and I really come from that prevention and early intervention lens. Personally, as a first-generation American, my experiences with disparities that are faced within services provided to diverse populations and the lack of inclusive interventions that promote health and that are able to affect change and change things like intergenerational trauma have really led me into the work of equity. And so with that, with having this opportunity to work with the Community Collective Impact Model for Change and work with my colleagues like Danielle to be able to put equity into all the areas of behavioral health is really what's driven my career. And it's kind of gotten me to the point that we've gotten to today. And we're excited to share as we've developed this project and the pieces that have come together from this and what our experiences have been. So I'll turn it over to Danielle to introduce herself.
Thank you, Tazeen, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. My name is Danielle Zeisloft. I'm the Assistant Director of Behavioral Health Services here at the Montgomery County Adamus Board. We are located in Dayton, Ohio. I wanted to mention that because I heard you mention Ohio. So just in case we have some friends here who are from out of the state. My focus is in supporting our prevention division as well as our treatment division here at our Adamus Board. How is equity related to our work? It's really ingrained in all of it. I was brought into the Adamus Board with the focus on working on our Ohio Disaster Response Project grant. That was in response to a series of significant crises that our region had experienced. I'll talk a little bit about that here later, but that set us up nicely for doing this work. And it's really just become very integrated into everything that we do and the projects which have kind of stemmed off of that ODRP grant. So with the focus on health equity and a trauma responsive lens is where my work comes from.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your expertise and feel like our attendees will have so much to learn from you. Equity and building capacity are closely tied on project planning. Your organization developed a unique steering committee in preparation for your CCIM4C project. Can you tell us more about about the Health Equity Steering Committee, how it was developed, who was invited, and how you pivoted when sometimes that answer is no when you invite folks?
Absolutely. So our steering committee was originally developed through that Ohio Disaster Response Project grant that I had mentioned. We had already launched an internal health equity steering committee and actually had another group on the side who was meeting monthly as a result of our partnership with the Racial Equity Institute's groundwater and phase 1 trainings. This funding opportunity from SAMHSA in partnership with OMAS allowed for the expansion and involvement of even more local stakeholders. So knowing that our community had suffered collective trauma, and through this, we collaborated with the Prevention Institute out of California. They were able to guide us through their culturally competent adverse community experiences and resilience framework. And through this process, Prevention Institute recommended the involvement of 6 key sectors involving civil participation and mobilization, education, employment and business, our faith communities, housing, and medical. So the key here was really to start small and to invite those in who we already had existing relationships with. If those who we contacted were unavailable, we really stressed the importance of them sending a designee, as they are the leaders within our county and their involvement was pivotal to the work that we really deeply wanted to do. So the next step with all of that was that Prevention Institute hosted a series of exclusive workshops for our staff and partners to really deepen our understanding of the influence of the role of prevention efforts and equity. The attendees of the workshop were then divided into groups at the completion of the sessions, just based on their level of involvement in those workshops. We had a group who was committed to the ongoing work, who later joined our steering committee, and those who were available to engage in key informant interviews to start the process of building our health equity strategic plan. I want to emphasize that this was not drafted in a silo. This wasn't an Adamus thing. We took this back to our steering committee several times for their feedback. And we open almost every conversation with this group with the caveat that we're not the experts in their respective sectors, and that this is a very inclusive space. We're always asking, who's not at the table that we need to call on? We've even developed a personal agreement with the understanding that we do have tough, sometimes sensitive conversations, but it's necessary to push this work forward to really understand each other and the community that we're serving. And this really set us up for the expansion of our DEI work and led to the formation and connection of our other initiatives, which we'll discuss a little bit further here. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And Tazeen, I want to leave room for you to also add to that if there are any additional pieces that you feel you want to highlight.
Yeah, I'll really just kind of add to that end piece of what we did to pivot. So we really didn't have a no, but rather we had individuals with interests within specific areas of the community, or they were connected to specific social determinants of health that they really cared about. So for example, an individual may care more about transportation access for seniors rather than income inequities faced by other populations. And we really took that into consideration, understanding that there is a place and, more importantly, an actual need for every single person in the community to be a part of this. So we operate as facilitators. As Danielle said, we opened up every conversation saying, you know, we're not the experts and we are relying on you as an expert in your area to be able to bring that to us. We refer to ourselves as connectors, facilitators, conveners, but never the experts. And we really rely on those those experts to help us develop effective, relevant, and appropriate strategies because they know the communities, they know what they're representing, and they know the area that they are experts in. So we really operate the Health Equity Steering Committee that we keep referring to as a living group. So many of you may have heard of like a living document that is constantly undergoing change, it's revolving. We do the same thing with our Health Equity Steering Committee, understanding that people will change, the community is going to change, the community is going to grow. While we focus and talk about different topics, different social determinants of health, it will continue to revolve. We continue to make an intentional effort to represent the 12 sectors of the community that Danielle mentioned that we take from the CDC, but we continue to have that open so that people feel that when the work is relevant to them, and that's the area where their expertise applies and they feel welcome to that. However, they're not obligated by any means to have to stay involved in every single part because that may just not be what they're interested in or relevant to the area of the community that they serve.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you, for those answers. I know that, as we talk about evolution, sometimes it's really natural where we identify, where to expand the work. Can you tell us a little bit about that organic process for you in this space?
Yes, so this integrative approach really fit nicely into our next set of initiatives, as I mentioned. So we were focused on working simultaneously upstream and downstream. So addressing individuals and policy that impacts their lives around the social determinants of health. The Community Collective Impact Model for Change funding opportunity came across my desk and we jumped on that opportunity to further this work. So thank you to our partners at Ohio University, OMOS, and PIRE for your partnership and guidance in this. It has been great for our community and further brought even more people together. The CCIM 4C 2.0 initiative focuses on the social determinants of health, specifically within minority and underserved communities. We know the zip codes within Montgomery County where the greatest need lies. And so those are really our targeted areas. We're not just throwing resources wherever feels good. We're very deliberate about this work that we're doing. Through our work with Prevention Institute that I had mentioned, they had identified through the key informant interviews 6 social determinants of health, which were the primary concerns of our community. So what our community was telling them was important for us to work on. So we prioritized those concerns that were identified through the work with our Health Equity Steering Committee. So they really determined what we should focus on, and they landed on food equity. We have a strong framework and infrastructure already here in Montgomery County, so that made that the most feasible. And it was very timely given the changes in legislation related to the end of pandemic-related supports.
Wonderful, thank you. And Tazeen, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that was a perfect response from Danielle. The only thing I will emphasize was the part where she said that we were very deliberate and intentional about the fact that we wanted the work that we were doing to be relatable and evidence-based specifically to our community and our county. And so that's the way that we started off with Prevention Institute's research and really looking at the assessment and capacity of what was happening locally for us. And I think that brought a lot of buy-in to the community partners we were working in, because everything that we were looking and presenting and the research that was coming in was specific and relevant to the communities that they worked, lived, and played in. And so that was really important to us as we got started on this journey.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I think as we think of your CCIM4C project, there were some really unique supports, and we've kind of touched on some of those already. We'd love to learn more about the in-depth details. So this was a really robust project that you guys pulled together, and I feel like it's this beautiful tapestry, as we have described it in our preparation sessions, is recognizing the way you weave together not only resources, but capacity and readiness of your community. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about the integrated approach of your project, how that set you up for success, and where did that intention come from? That wasn't an accidental stuff. You really, it took leadership and intention. So I think it would be beneficial for our participants to learn more about how that was set.
So the intention was set going back to leaning onto that community. So we brought our plan to them that, so Tazeen, myself, and our director, Tristan Ball, we sat down and said, there was a moment we said, what are we doing? I don't know, but we're doing it because nobody's doing it. And again, knowing that we're not the experts, we were intentional at calling those who are leaders within our community to the table and constantly asking, who's not here? What else do we need to work on? Do you have connections here or there? And setting up meetings, grabbing coffee and having a 30-minute conversation with someone goes a long way. Relationship building here is key. And we have expanded outside of the 6 sectors that were recommended by Prevention Institute to be all-inclusive of our community. And as Tazeen mentioned, it's fluid. So some months we do discuss topics that aren't relevant to an individual. And so we try to have that agenda out ahead of time so that they can make the determination on whether or not they feel it's appropriate or worth their time to be present, and that they're always welcome to bring in other partners. Tazeen, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there really quickly and say and expand upon kind of what you said of we continue that intentional outreach, even as we continue the work that we've started through this model with the Community Collective Impact for Change. We continue to still do intentional outreach. I think actually just today, Danielle set up another call with us to go have lunch with another community partner where we want to learn from them what areas they focus on in the community, and they come from the faith-based sector, and what are their connections and what are they looking towards doing, what's important to them, where are their priorities. So having that continuous capacity assessment of what's important to your community in different areas in your community has been really important for us. And then also looking at who's already doing some of this work or at least moving in that direction. So for us, we're really lucky to have an amazing resource, which both Danielle and I are intimately a part of, which is our Montgomery County Prevention Coalition. And it's a group of active 250 volunteers that do amazing work in the space of prevention, early intervention, and honestly, all across the behavioral health continuum of care. So to be able to partner with them and to be able to look at their strategies and what they're doing has also been beneficial for us to be able to leverage what's happening in our community and truly come together to have that collective impact rather than working in those silos, and really using the community to say, is this important to you and is this what you want? And then making those strategies actually relevant and appropriate for what we're trying to do in different spaces. And we happen to start working in this space of food equity.
Thank you, Tazeen, and thank you, Danielle. I think as we think about, as you started working in this space around food equity, Tazeen, you did such a great job of describing the data that you initially analyzed and how you selected areas of priority focus as we were preparing for this. Could you elaborate a little bit on the source of those data, what type of data you initially selected, and how you prioritized where to start while recognizing long-term goals?
Yeah, so as Danielle kind of mentioned, we really came together at the table together with our director and said, what needs to happen in our community? Why are we working on all the different projects that we're working on, and how do they all interconnect with one another? And as many of you in this space, I'm sure you know that, you see a grant, you apply for funding, and then you have that funding for a limited amount of time and you're working on these concrete ideas, but then, hey, that funding ends and then you move on to another project. And we really wanted to say that that's not helpful for the community. We need to see how all of these different puzzle pieces fit together and what we're doing over time. Like, what is our overall 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan? Why are we applying for the grants that we're applying for? Why are we looking for funding in certain areas? And so we really came together to put it together a very intentional plan. And we aligned all the different projects that we were working on. And as we started to do that, we really said, we realized that we need to work in different areas of the community simultaneously. And so we also needed data for those different areas in the community. So we started working with Prevention Institute to really understand what was happening kind of on that upstream level of where can we have policy change, where can we have sustainable change. But then we said, well, that's great, and we need that sustainability piece so that when these grant dollars end and funding ends, this is something that can continue to live on in our community. We can't just ignore the downstream or the midstream day-to-day efforts or the organizational efforts that are put in by our providers. That also needs to be supported. So we've then made an intentional focus of partnering with Healthy Policy Institute of Ohio to be able to collect data relevant to those downstream and midstream efforts. And so we're doing focus groups with individuals with lived experience that live in our county, that work in our county, that face these disparities at these different levels in these communities. And then also working to do focus groups with our providers that serve individuals in our counties. And what that does is gives us a very accurate picture of those different levels from micro to macro of what's happening in our community. And based on that is where we really started an assessment of saying, where do we have the capacity in the organizations that one are already doing amazing work and have some momentum in our community? But also what can we continue to help collaborate and grow and work together to bring and to help foster collaborative. And so that's really where those 6 top priority areas that Danielle mentioned in the beginning that Prevention Institute found came from. And we did an assessment within our Health Equity Steering Committee to say, hey, what do we have the capacity for right now? Who do we have at the table that we can make the effort in one of these areas? And that's kind of where we landed with food equity. And our food bank and other partners have become amazing individuals and partners that we've learned from, collaborated with, leaned on as experts in our community. And then we're able to become that connector to help them connect to other organizations. So one thing that kind of came out of that was being able to connect our food bank with our Montgomery County Prevention Coalition. So we can provide opportunities for a lot of our providers that are part of that volunteer network to be able to actually learn and understand the resources that are available through the food bank that then they can offer within their behavioral health services to the individuals that they work with. And then they're confident to speak about the resources that exist in our community and also enriching them and causing awareness of what's going on. And so that's just kind of one example of one of the strategies that developed and came out of that. But we're really excited by it, and we're hoping that we're going to continue to grow those strategies and then also continue to expand this process. As I said, it's kind of that fluid process where, yes, we started in the realm of food equity, but there were 5 other areas that Prevention Institute highlighted for us: housing, transportation, et cetera. So we will continue to build out comprehensive behavioral health plans for all of those different areas with the experts in our community related to that area. Anything I missed, Danielle?
Not that you missed, but I really want to emphasize the piece on diversifying your funding. So for any project to be sustainable and have a long-lasting impact, you can't just rely on that 12-month, 2-year grant, because that ends. So always looking for those opportunities. And I know that the center does link some of those to their website. So I would always encourage looking for different ways to find the dollars to do this work. And as Tazeen said, as we're moving forward, we're looping back to the other disparities that we want to work on. I actually found a really nice diagram. It's kind of a play on the strategic prevention framework from SAMHSA. So we're getting started, we're assessing, planning, and implementing, but we're constantly evaluating ourselves, our process, our outcomes, and what we're doing. Is it effective? And then we're getting started on the next thing. So keeping the community engaged and educating them about the why and what this process looks like, backed by science.
My goodness, that is so amazing. That's amazing. And really want to thank you for that perspective of how can we use, the planning framework that we already use in a way that supports sustainability and helps us in the long run. And I think that really nicely segues to some of our discussions around how you've expanded the use of data. So can you tell us more about how you have expanded your use of data and data sources to represent your full community? So you shared a little bit about how you have individuals with lived experience. Is there any other detail you want to add to that?
Yes, I can kind of go ahead and start. So that is kind of one of our main ways where we are expanding our data to say, what do you need in order to make your work equitable and inclusive to the community that you're serving? And so that was a gap that we found through our Health Equity Steering Committee, that the data for individuals with lived experience wasn't really there for us. And then also the individuals that provide those services, or the individuals who, how can we better support them? We always kind of work at an organization or a policy level, but we didn't come down and work at an individual level within that. And we found that there was a need for that we were just kind of we were hearing anecdotally, different things than we would get kind of in those big, large organization-wide surveys. And thinking about it logically, we were like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because probably the individual that's responding to that survey isn't the individual who's out in the community, boots on the ground. And we really wanted to know that, to know, again, how can we align our funding? How do we know where to look for more dollars and what's relevant to our community? And so that's been one of our ways that we've been expanding the data to make it more useful. And then we also make our data available to everyone and anyone who wants it. We're really transparent with our reports, because we get the best authentic feedback that way of, what if we asked this, or what if we looked at this? We always start off with kind of, there is no limit, knowing that let's just get everything kind of on a paper of everything we'd want to know and why we want to know it. We really start off with the why every time we go into that data piece, because we never want to collect anything and say, well, okay, we have that, but what are we going to do with it? So we always already kind of have an idea of, well, maybe if we need this piece of information, it would help us understand this community or this area or whatever underlying root cause is going on better. And so we start with that lens and then move into that. And that also makes us very intentional of what kind of data we're collecting, and being able to share that with our community partners also kind of helps to engage that relationship and increase that buy-in.
And Danielle, I see you're already unmuted, so I'm going to let you go ahead and expand, emphasize, however you want to drive this show.
So in addition to what Tazeen has mentioned about our own assessments and partnerships and gathering the data that we have here in-house that we share out, we do have great relationships with our public health department. We have a partnership with Ascenda Innovations, who analyzes our behavioral health data. So we're able to pull some of the trends that we're seeing there locally. We do research on census data. So what's happening nationally compared to what's happening here locally. With the CCIM project specifically, working with the Dayton Food Bank, we asked them for their reports. How many people are they serving? How many households are they serving? And that's what helped us narrow down our goals, our deliverables and outcomes for the initiative. So asking the questions, leaning on partners and building those relationships is, we always have to go back to that.
Absolutely, yes. And you touched on some really great themes around connection, sharing data, some ideas about like, hey, this planning framework, there's a way we can maximize it to work in our community. So we wanted to hold a little bit of space for some large group discussion before we have the opportunity to enter some breakout rooms. So I would like to invite our participants to either unmute or to share in the chat, does the experience shared today align with your own in prevention? Or is there anything you'd like to add? Maybe some advice for someone newer in the field, or have you tried something similar that either worked or didn't work in one of these areas? Because I think, in prevention, we often have the opportunity to connect with our health department and work on supporting some projects around food equity and food access, or maybe green space or some things like that, but we don't always get to be as hands-on. So I think we'd love to hear from our participants today listening in. Does this align with your experience as far as sharing data and, maximizing use of a planning model? What was different? Do you have experience in this space? Some of that discussion. And if you are more comfortable sharing in the chat, you're welcome to do that.
I'll go ahead, Tessa.
Thank you.
So for those who don't know me on the call, my name is Ashley Garcia, and I am the Prevention Program Manager with Columbus Public Health. So we're kind of unique in that we are a prevention program that operates within a public health environment. And then we're also funded through our local Franklin County ADAMH board. So we kind of have that dual component where we're constantly doing cross collaboration and a lot of education within the health department to help the health department understand prevention science as it correlates and relates to public health and how we work together and in tandem, and we tend to support each other's initiatives. That's how we've also been able to do some youth-led work with our tobacco policy folks, bringing in, so they wanted to work with youth. We were already working with youth, so we created some really great opportunities there. I think the biggest part is just making sure that we're at the table and that we continue to find those avenues and cross-section opportunities to continue that dialogue, to reframe the prevention science and how we do work together, how we share the data. And I'm kind of getting a reputation at the health department because we're really trying to expand to those marginalized and at-risk communities, especially around our immigrant and refugee populations that are like Bhutanese, Nepali, Somalian, Congolese. They're all flocking to us asking for resources and, what can we do around ATOD issues? And I'm like, well, first of all, we need to do some needs assessments and we need to go out and have some focus groups because I'm not going to take my evidence-based program that's not designed for that population into that community. It's just not going to work. Let's sit down and have a conversation on what are those issues and try to find stakeholders who can help us develop some really great programming and PSAs and handouts and things like that that would really reach them in a more meaningful way. So that's just some of the things that we're doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
I'll just say our public health department operates very similarly to that. So there's programming within the public health department that we as an ADAMHS board fund, but they also have their own different diverse programming from other funding sources that they provide prevention education. And I absolutely love that approach, Ashley, that you mentioned of making things evidence-based relevant to that population. I think a lot of times, we just look at a curriculum and if it's evidence-based, it's kind of like evidence-based for kids. And having that lens of inclusivity and diversity is really important, because if it's not relevant to a specific culture and ethnicity or a community, it's obviously not going to be successful. And so that's amazing that you guys take that approach. And we have found that our public health partners are very critical to us. We even apply for grants in conjunction with one another, support each other through a multitude of different avenues. So that's amazing to hear that you're doing that work.
Yes, that is amazing work. Is there, thank you so much for unmuting and sharing. And sometimes on these calls, it can feel a little like we're talking into the void. So thank you so much for being so open and sharing. Would anyone else like to share before we investigate some breakout rooms? So thank you, everyone. I think Jen is going to advance the slide to the next one. And is going to take the lead on this slide for us. Jen, are you ready to dive in, or would you like me to take over?
No, I'm ready. Sorry about that. Technology is fantastic, right? So we're going to break out into some group conversations in a minute. I pulled this slide. It complements the the guidebook that I'm going to drop in the chat here, provided by the CDC. This guidebook was the foundation of much of the project, the community collective impact. Wait, can you help me with the acronym? It's CCIM4C.
Collective impact model for community change.
You got it. Thank you.
And I'm going to drop that in the chat there. Oh, sorry, guys. Let me drop the link for you now.
It is a mouthful on demand. So the project is really rooted in this guidebook that I dropped in the chat, but I wanted to kind of think a little bit, pull out the social determinants of health piece here. And so it is much of this, you may not have seen this model before or this graphic before, but the content of it should not be new information to many of us on the call. Kind of walks us through the phases of a social determinants of health initiative. So you're going to create that partnership, and much of this our speakers have already talked about, right? You're, kind of build that vision in the assessment phase. You're building your capacity, starting to map what assets you have. Is the community ready to begin the work, and start moving into what is the best approach, which will depend on where your community is at in their readiness level. So you select your approach for change. You move into the action phase. The reporting and the documentation of your work is so important. So, I think it probably goes without saying for all of us on the call that you always plan to evaluate. But then you think about the sustainability too, and the sustainability should be always, front and center as you're thinking through some of this work and that outcome and the goal really is to achieve health equity. So with that in mind, and I've gone the wrong way, our first breakout session, there's 2 rooms to choose from. And Tessa, I don't know, are you going to randomly assign or let folks choose? It doesn't really matter.
I have allowed folks to select in.
Perfect. Tessa and I are each going to facilitate a conversation, but the question is the same. So, if you're a preventionist, where do you see the SPIF model reflected in the model that I just shared or the work that Danielle and Tazeen has shared with us today? I think, Tessa, if you're ready to set up that first breakout room, I think we're ready to go.
I'm just clicking open room. So you should see the opportunity to open a breakout room, and it looks a little different depending on your version of Zoom. So some folks may see it on the bottom. There's some squares at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So there's a ribbon at the bottom, and next to reactions, you'll see something there. I'm going to hop into breakout room 1. Jen's going to hop into the second one. And I think we're going to go ahead and stay there for just 5 minutes, and then we'll all come back together. We did not beat the timer. For my PAX friends, we did not beat the timer. We tried real hard. I'm so sorry about it. You know, we did hear some thoughts, and we can work with the overall group to see how we feel about it. So I was selected as the reporter, or just kind of volun jumped in instead of voluntold. But what we did kind of here is, we talked a little bit about all of our experience within prevention, and we felt that, this model that's displayed, while it may be a public health model, public health and, what we would probably just refer to as prevention, really look at the same issues, but from a slightly different lens. We work in the same spaces. We, may need to catwalk our language at sometimes to realize that we're talking about the same piece, but realistically, this is prevention. It's just laid out in a slightly different model. Is that appropriate for all my group 1 mates?
Sorry, I need to unmute myself before I start talking. I too was designated as the report out person for our group, which I'm happy to do. So, we talked about that graphic, really aligning nicely with the SPIF. We saw so many elements of the SPIF in there, and talked about the importance of the capacity building, the sustainability piece of this. We talked about some tools that in other frameworks that our group uses to advance health equity and consider it and bring it into their work. And so I think, one of the tools, I'm sorry, I think it was Barbara was saying she was looking for it. So when she found it, she would send it to us. So we'll make sure to share it with you. We talked about really when looking at the root causes, doing something as simple as asking why, 5 or 6 times about a particular issue helps to peel back layers of that onion and uncover truly what some of the root causes are and start taking a large problem and make it, bring it down to something actionable. I see something coming up in the chat, and I think, let's see. So Catherine, you said when we prepared our problem gambling plan, we used the public health approach, public CSAP strategies, and the SPIF. So covering multiple frameworks because gambling prevention was new to our area. And that makes sense. The other thing I think about in our conversation made me think about is, taking into account those social determinants of health and health equity, during that planning phase, the needs assessment phase, the data gathering phase, you may not have data on some of your communities that have the most disparate outcomes. And so you might have to go collect it. And remember, that can look different. It doesn't necessarily have to be quantitative data, sometimes qualitative data. I think as we all find out, even these key informant interviews, right? When Tazeen and Danielle were getting coffee in our 30-minute meetings, that's all information, and what we choose to do with it can really make a difference in our planning and how we engage and network with other organizations, individuals, and communities. And just as we were closing out, one more tool was being shared. And so I just wanted to offer space for you to finish that thought. I think it might have been Justina, but I'm not sure.
That was actually me, Jen.
Oh, thanks, Danielle.
And Tazeen, I'm going to tap on you as well to elaborate and expand on this. I was sharing with the group that as we work with our prevention providers, we are using a different approach. It's an expert recommendations for implementing change. So our ERIC strategies, it's more of a clinical framework. However, this is another area where we've taken it back to our providers, developed a work group and asked them what would work for them, and have brought this group together and asked them to come up with real life examples to help with their documentation of their work. So that's just a tool that I'd recommend checking out if you're looking for other frameworks for implementing change.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I know we are moving right along and heading towards our closing statements, and I want to keep us on track. So thank you everyone for your time and your energy today. I think we could really probably spend another 30 minutes on all of these topics. So thank you for the robust discussion. Thank you for making room on your calendars for us. I'm going to hand it over to Jen for some closing pieces, and then you'll get an evaluation and we'll go from there. Thank you so much.
Sure, absolutely. So if you joined us for Prevention Exchange before, you've seen this slide. Just a QR code that takes you to our website. And then our handles for all of our social media channels. So we'd love to have you follow us if you're not already. And then as a nod of respect to our facilitators and our speakers, if you could please scan the QR code and take that very brief evaluation survey before you disconnect today. Our March session will focus on prevention as a multidisciplinary profession. So as soon as we have our speakers confirmed, we will update our website and then make sure that we get information out in our newsletter and our social media channels and the various other networks that we work through. So with that being said, we'll leave the screen up for just one more second so you can start on that evaluation if you haven't yet, but really appreciate your time today. Thank you for connecting with the center and for all of your support, and please feel free to reach out if you need anything or would like us to help make a connection for you. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.